It's dangerous.
I felt it yesterday.
You okay?
Yeah. At our age is not the same thing falling today that falling when we were 8.
Hey man.
Okay,
Or 28.
Yeah, or 28. Exactly. For one. Yeah, for yeah. I'm gonna put it here. No, is that okay here?
Sure. You're a panelist. It's a privilege.
Good morning. Welcome to the Misk Pavilion. My name is Sarah Khvairi. I'm an initiatives manager with Misk Foundation and the Misk Global Forum. We are here today in Davos because we want to bring in the voice of young people. Young people have a huge impact on our world today, especially when it comes to global citizenship and the role they play in their local communities and how that translates into the global community. And a big part of the work we do is about discovering, developing, and empowering young people to do just that and to be able to meet the challenge of change. We started off last year with the Global Youth Index to look at how young people today are and how we can help them with the challenges they're facing. And as the year progressed, we started launching a different number of initiatives, including the Miss Grand Challenges, which focused on global citizenship, as well as the Entrepreneurship World Cup, which focused on our other focus area, the entrepreneurship track. And today we're here to talk about global citizenship, and with our lovely panel and our amazing moderator, Eric, who will be talking a lot more about the work that we're doing and how they view global citizenship.
Thank you, and thanks for having us. So let's just be honest for a moment, and I want to see people's fingers on this on a scale of 1 to 5, about how tired you are in this moment. So 5 is like, woo, ready to go, excited. 1 is ready to nap. And where are folks? I see some 1s, some 5s.
I have a 4.
5s. Okay, so I have 2 confessions to kick off our panel. One is my body right now is in 3 different time zones. So I'm between Los Angeles, Boston, and here in Davos. So it's either 11 o'clock at night, 1 in the morning, or 7. So you either get party Eric moderator or serious morning Eric moderator, and maybe a little bit of both. The other thing is we're having a conversation about youth, and we are not necessarily young people, and youngish. And so I mention that because I know that there's some young people here, and so I'll really be in the discussion leaning into your voices and your expertise. Expertise is found in many different ways, and we tend, particularly in environments like this, to privilege expertise through study and research. But lived experience is actually a real powerful model for learning. So I'm going to encourage folks to bring their full range of expertise. So I want to do a little framing, both about this question of global citizenship, which to me is being a global actor, which is seeing a problem and doing something about it, as well as the unique role that young people can play in this. And so I want to do some framing about what I see the problem as and what I see the opportunity. And then we're going to engage in conversation and then bring everyone else in. Does that sound good?
Yep. Yes.
Yeah.
That's all we got, so if you're going to say no, I'm not changing it. So I want to start with a story. Actually, I was in the United States talking to a group of about 120 14, 15-year-olds who were really curious about the world. And the thing they were most concerned about was violence and the effect that violence had on them, on their community, and on young people all over the globe. And I had asked them how many of them had had a first-hand experience with violence in their lives, of some form or another. Every single hand in that room went up. Right? Every single one of these young people had an experience with violence in their lives. So I said, okay, how many of you have an idea on how to solve the problem of violence in your community? Right, a solution that you would love to implement. 80-90% of the hands went up in the air. Right, these young people had ideas, they had solutions, they had things that they wanted to do. So I said, okay, how many of you have had an adult offer to put time, energy, resources, anything behind your idea? Every single hand in that room went down. you see the dissonance, right? There are approximately 1.6 billion young people on the planet, and they are both proximal to the problem and often proximal to the solutions, and yet we rarely invite young people to be part of the solution, right? Our narratives, the stories we tell about young people is we tend to see them as victims that we need to protect. They are perpetrators that we need to punish, or they're the future, right? How often do we go into schools and tell young people that you're going to be great leaders someday, right? You'll be great global citizens someday, which tells young people that they're not now. So I want to share two interesting statistics with you from our work. So one is data on this generation that's coming up. So Generation Z or Centennial. So sorry, millennials, your time is up. We've moved on. Thanks for playing. Fascinating group of young people. First of all, incredibly entrepreneurial. They want to create, they want to make, they want to design. They don't want to sit in classrooms, they want to be on Khan Academy. The second is they're connected digitally in incredibly powerful ways. And then finally, they want to change the world, right? So I'm a member of Generation X. When we were coming of age, 12% of us wanted to change the world with our jobs, with our vocations, with our lives. For millennials, that number's 39%. For this generation that's coming up, it's 60%. 60% of young people around the globe coming of age right now want to make the world a better place, right? They want to transform their communities, their world in better, stronger, more powerful ways. And yet nobody's calling them and supporting to do that work. And so one of the things we will be exploring is how do we unleash that power of young people, right? How do we unleash their moral imaginations, their compassionate creativity, and how do we ensure that that's not just a global elite, right? How do we make sure that the space of global citizenship is not just reproducing the same inequality that exists in every other space? How can this be one that's radically inclusive and looks different? So those are some of the things that we are exploring today. I want to just say one thing about this partnership that we're building with Misk. So I'm the co-founder and CEO of Peace First, and basically we have built a digital home for young people who want to change the world. From 13 all the way up to 25, we support and inspire young people who are tackling climate change, food scarcity, whatever they're passionate about, and helping build those networks so that young people can collaborate and work together. So we have a global network of young people from 127 countries, and we provide digital design tools, funding, as well as mentorship and connection. What I'm finding so interesting about this generation is their level of curiosity. The ways in which our traditional silos, which exist so strong in the development work of this is a food issue or a climate issue or a healthcare issue, the ways they're breaking down those silos and finding common cause. And so as I think about global citizenship, it's not just thinking about how we help young people engage in the world, but what are the ways that we're inviting them and supporting them to engage. So let's begin. So let's start with that question. As you think about this concept of global citizenship, and you think about the unique role that young people play, how would you define global citizenship? What does it mean to be a global citizen in this day and age?
Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much. So, my name is Alan Cotolanca. I represent Ipsos this morning, and in our company we do a lot of surveys, global surveys about what's happening with young people and with youth. And we have some interesting data. And as you said, the gap today between our generation and Generation Z, for example, is higher than the gap that we had with millennials or X. For obvious reasons, because the day they're born, they are connected. They're born in a different world that ours or even millennials. But let me tell you something, just a little piece of data. What we found is that this generation, young people today, are pretty optimistic. So we adults, well, if I can say adults or other generations, or I can say old,
Wise.
are pretty pessimistic about the world. So, but these people are pretty optimistic. But you asked me about the definition of global citizenship. The point here is that they're pretty optimistic, but it's very different by country. Very different. Okay? And I won't give you the data country by country, it doesn't make any sense, but I can give you 2 slots. Most of the more optimistic young people are in developing countries, and most of less optimistic or even pessimistic young people are in developed countries. We have the data country by country. That's pretty astonishing. That's one thing that I can tell you. The other thing that I can tell you is that young people have appetite for brands and actions that are good for society. That's something that did not happen, or maybe happened in millennials, but less than what is happening today with the new generations. So they are even telling us in our surveys that they are willing to pay more for brands that are doing good to society. I don't have that answer for the people of our age, but I think the answer would be different. So, in order to answer your question and to trigger this panel, I can tell you that it's pretty optimistic what we see. And our mission is not to let them become pessimistic. Our mission is to connect with them and permit them to be creative enough, permit them to be free enough to keep that, and not to try to get them into the classical framework of society. That's the first point.
Thank you. It's my turn. Hello everyone, thank you for the invitation. My name is Misraim Macias. I work in Mexico in a city called León. León is a very particular city because it's 1.7 million people and it's gonna grow over 3 million people in the next 10 years. I am the responsible for the public policies and attention programs for the youth. But put a little bit of context. The youth in Mexico represents 33% of our population, and between the ages of 12 to 29 years old. So you have to add the other generation that is from 0 years to 11 years. So it makes a total amount of 60% of the population in Mexico is under 30 years old. Well, at least in my city, and the whole Mexico is around 55%. So this generation, I mean, we live as millennials the transition from analog to a digital world. This new generation is a full digital world, and it's more connected. And I just wanted to point out that about global citizenship is that it's not a trend, it's not a marketing concept. Right now for them it's an identity. I mean, I'm part of the Global Shapers community, and we were each presenting ourselves like with others. One of the community, he says, "Hey, I'm here as a global shaper," and each one of us were like, say, I come from Mexico, I come from sub-Saharan Africa, I come from every country, and this guy really shocked us, and it was like a really good statement, because he said, I come from Australia, but I represent the world. So I think that's kind of like the trend that's going on right now, but it's more like an identity, as I was telling you, because we did a survey. It's called the Shaper Survey, and 30,000 people answered that survey. And there's a question that says, how do you identify yourself? Do you identify as Mexican, as part of a race, or part of a certain group? And the number one answer is, I identify myself as human. You know, so there are like these barriers coming down, and at least in ideology and identity. So I think that right now the world must be prepared for you to have friends everywhere, to have connections everywhere, no matter where you are. And now the trend is going to be, how do we prepare the world for the next 50 years, for the next 100 years, so that this generation, first, they don't get pessimistic, and then they build a better world for every one of us. Well, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Foundation, for having me over. My name is Gopi Gopalakrishnan. I work for an organization called World Health Partners, which is a service delivery organization. How do you reach essential healthcare to communities which are underserved, rural areas, very poor? And how do you use the resources which are already there in order to improve the quality of life, just by way of introduction. I was kind of asked to be provocative by the moderator, so let me try to be. I think essentially we all carry, because of our survival instincts, we carry a degree of tribalism in us. All of us have that in us. And I'll give you an example. Many, many years ago, when my wife and I moved from India to live in the US, and in the initial stages, whenever we were lost, which we were very often, my wife would nudge me saying, yeah, look, there's a guy who looks like an Indian, just go and ask him for direction. But that look probably is as lost as we were. But still, something in the tribalism says somehow, you find some similarities, and therefore go and ask this guy. And over a period of time, we realize, in fact, the much better way of doing it is to lose that and open your mind and ask the black man or the white man or the brown man, irrespective of who he is, to ask for directions, and you did much better. Because essentially I think we have two sides to it, the good sides and the, I won't say the bad sides, but the different side. Something which is common and something which is not common. The common one is what we should cherish and what we should invest in. And for me, a global citizen is the one who will have that commonality across all of us. So when you're talking about the students in Los Angeles, 14, 15-year-old, who are already talking about global issues, willy-nilly they are global citizens. They are already there. At 14 years of age, if they are talking about that, they will get there. I'm more worried about those communities in the interiors of, say, Pakistan or India. For that matter, even Saudi Arabia. I was told, much to my surprise, I spent the last 2 years, brief periods in Saudi Arabia, once in Dammam, and just this December in Riyadh, talking at the universities and with the ministry. I was told that Saudi Arabia also has poor people, and there are communities there who don't have access to the ability to find the commonality. If you want them to become global citizens, they will have to have access to it through education. The kids in Los Angeles have access to education. They are exposed to the world because they have the channel of accessing information. That's what education is. What Aristotle thought 2,000 years ago, I am able to get it only because I am able to access that information. Those kids in those underserved areas don't have that. How do you make that available? How do you bring about a common or a level playing field for every citizen of the world so that we all get to be global? Because for all you know, there is an Einstein or an Ibn Tufail hiding somewhere, and unless we can retrieve it, the world is going to lose them. And global citizenship for me is that journey of discovering those resources which are lying hidden because they don't have access to some of the conveniences that we, whether we like it or not, we as global citizens already have. Just the fact we are sitting in Davos talking about it makes us leaders or global citizens, etc. I'm not worried about it. I'm worried about the rest of those people who, simply because they happened to born at the wrong place at the wrong time, are denied some basic access to health, education, and social infrastructure, etc., which is not our fault. It is our fault, and we haven't made that happen to them. How do you correct it so that global citizen can happen globally? That's what I'm interested in. The differences will remain, and the global, our access to that information, etc., will give us the ability to cherish those differences, will celebrate those differences, instead of being frightened by it and having the kind of nonsense that's going on now, the kind of divisions that we see there. That will all disappear if we somehow can highlight the goodness in all of us and create this global citizenship. Thank you.
So we're talking about the power of hope as a framework for being a global citizen, and the power that young people have in terms of how they use their dollars, the brands they care about, this emerging identity of being a human, and then the ways in which we're still rooted in our tribes, and the gravitational pull of those identities that often that often pit one group against another as we think about competing resources and this real deep question of access. So to be a global citizen implies access to a global community, which is not open to everybody. And so you've done some really, I think, groundbreaking research about young people globally. Tell us what you're learning about young people today and what you think it might mean for those of us who share a passion for engaging young people as global citizens.
Okay, so I don't have data for everything, but we have the learnings that we have had in the years of studying young people and other segments of the society. Before going there, I would like just to challenge a little bit, not challenge, but to be careful with some concepts. I mean, being global citizen, for me, it doesn't mean losing the concept of where's home. It's very dangerous when somebody loses that, because a human being is not designed for that. And the second one, and the research we have done, the differences between urban people and non-urban people, as you said it, is huge. It's enormous. And more people in urban cities, in big cities, the level of connectivity and access that they have is more and more different to young people today than it was before. Okay, so that's a piece of data. Another piece of data that we discussed pretty much yesterday in the World Economic Forum Congress Center, it's the concept of trust. And I was in a panel talking about trust, and especially trust about data, which takes me to data privacy. And young people, only 43% of young people trust of what governments and companies are going to do with their data, right? So, and we could imagine that young people have a level of trust that is much more higher than millennials, or, as we said earlier, old people, and it's not the case. It's pretty across the board, and it's a big deal. That it's a big deal because we can say that everybody's connected now, but I don't think we've seen where this is going to be. I mean, the level of data that will be shared is enormous and growing every day. So that's a big topic for young people today. However, as I said at the beginning, these age people are really creative and very, as I said, very fresh. And one of the answers that they gave us in the survey is, I would be okay to give away all my data, but I need to get some return on investment on that. A better price for this, or make sure that you are going to design good products for society. So again, it comes again to this optimism and this level of confidence that they can have. Instead, in our age, we just say, no, I don't trust what you're going to do with the data, and we stop there. We don't go beyond that and give an idea. And I think it goes to your point at the beginning.
And so I'm curious, so you're sitting on this wealth of data and finding these divides between the developing world and the developed world, urban, rural. Any other surprises about how young people are thinking as consumers, as students, as citizens?
Yeah, we realize also that young people have a completely different definition of possessing things. They are less interested in possessing a car or possessing things. They are more in using things for a little period of time and then getting away. And in our generation, possessing was important. It was even your flag to society.
Right.
And that is not happening anymore. It's a big deal for brands. It's a completely big deal. It's a completely game changer for brands around the world. So I think that's one piece of data that can be interesting.
Don't tell BMW. So you have a passion around access, right? And so how do you think about the ways in which we invite, that we radically expand who gets to participate as a global citizen, who sees themselves as a global citizen, and how do we reach young people to give them that space, that message, that connectivity?
It's not an easy question, as much because of the sheer logistics involved in it. But the advantages outweigh the effort, so we must do it. I will just one point before I say. When I say that there should not be differences, they should cherish those differences. If someone has different homes, someone is in one country, someone else is in another country, I'm saying we should cherish it. But there should be a common thread of humanity that connects us all of it. So despite the differences, we will cherish each other, is what I meant by it. How do we get to them? Best, the easiest way, in a kind of a systemic way, is strengthen aspects like education, because we already have certain channels which are well established, recognized, there is not going to be much resistance. What goes through the channels is what is often being challenged. And there's also distortion, including media, which is now getting extremely opinionated and biased in ways which are not very healthy.
Not the United States, but I imagine other places.
No, the US is the beacon of all democracy and other things, and we all. And the advantage of engaging with the youth is the older people get, the more regimented their thinking becomes. Whereas the youth have an ability to experiment, to innovate, to think outside of established, norms, etc. It's not very normative thinking. That is something which we can exploit, because now it is a very specialized world we are inheriting. I'm talking about healthcare, for instance. Everyone knows that in healthcare, the most important thing to get it is people don't get sick, or if they get sick, you catch them early so that you can treat them at a primary level instead of it becoming care that should be provided at the tertiary level, which is much more expensive. But healthcare systems have been taken over by these tertiary specialists. Everything is verticalized, expensive, etc. The youth can break that. Youth will be able to break it because they will be able to, explore uncharted waters and find solutions at the basic level, which these experts will never do, because they are living in their own sinecures, their own cocoons. And so that advantage, how do you unleash? That can happen if you also tailor your education system, etc. Media, I'm more or less giving up, including the US. But at least there are certain formal structures in place which we can use and we can benefit from. That will be a good way to go.
I love that image of young people as innovators, and so thinking about how we tap into young people's innate innovation, power, creativity to build that connectivity. So rather than thinking as young people as objects we need to do things too, engaging them as nodes of innovation, creativity. Ms. Rahim, you've done thinking about how we actually engage and support young people in those roles in a number of different capacities. And I'm curious your thoughts about how we take these individual bright spots and build on them. Because one of the things we all wrestle with is, there's a great program or a great curriculum or an amazing leader in point A, and then we want, okay, how do we get that everywhere, right? How do we take those ideas and spread them and connect them? And I'd love your thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, and your question reminds me of whenever we start a congress or a talk or something about the youth, we always ask the question, what it means to be young, because according to the law, where I live, it's between the ages of 12 to 29. So if you're 30, you're no longer young. even though you have the capacity to innovate, even though you have the resilience to fail and to try new things, or if you're 45 and you have like this young spirit, you're not as young. But the question that you're telling, or that you are telling me right now, is that I do believe that one of the drivers of changing this perception that the young are, well, that the youth is like a disease, you know, like while you are young, don't worry, don't get pregnant, do some exercise, and work, have experience, so when you have a certain age, now you can be productive, now you can give to the world. I think that we must change that perception. I think that youth is the biggest driver of change in all cities. And I believe that youth is the biggest driver of innovation in every community. And we must not only see them as that, but make them part of the conversation. I mean, I think that the World Economic Forum this year took a really bold decision of having 6 co-chairs being a global shapers, you know? 6 of the 7 co-chairs this year were under 30 years. And the opening remarks, they were like provoking. They were like very disruptive. And what I saw is that there's no path, or there's no way to be young. You know, that there's different perspectives. And even though we're talking about globalization 4.0, even though we're talking about the 4th industrial revolutions, we must not forget that there are refugees. We must not forget that there's climate change. We must not forget about this. So there's a whole diversity of the young, and the important part of it is how we make young people part of the conversation, and how do we not only listen to them, but give them a voice and give them like this opportunity to participate not only in these events, but in public policy, in the creation of new business models, in the creation of new societies. I just want to share a really quick example. In my city, we were designing the government program for the next 5 years. And it's a local, as I told you, it's a 1.7 million city. And the mayor said, it is a very attractive city. We're going to invest on concerts, we're going to invest in having like more tourists here. And there was a question that a young person asked him, and did you already ask the young what they want? Did you already ask the young what they really want to see in the city? So we did it, and after we surveyed 1,600 young people from the city, we found out that in 5 years they don't want to live there. So we had to change the whole model in less than 1 month, and to make it attractive. So what I'm trying to say is that many times we think, and I'm still in the age of young, but we think what they need, instead of asking them and making part of the conversation. And there's this concept that if you're young, you're like an empty bottle. I'm gonna give you like, I don't know, like all the content that you need to be prepared, but they are already filled out with information. They are already filled out with everything that's happening in the world. I mean, we can know everything like this, like very, very fast. This is not the information age, this is the creativity age. What are you doing with the information you have? Not giving them more information. So I believe that.
So radical notion of actually asking young people what they want and need, and then give them an opportunity to create that.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just ask them what you want, because they're gonna say, I want employment, and I want to have better salaries, and to work less, because I want to travel, because I want more experiences than only things. No? But first ask them, then make them part of the conversation. How we can create better cities, better policies, a better world together in this transgenerational concept. Not only the youth and the not youth, you know, how we can make a whole conversation together about it.
Brilliant. So I want to bring folks in. I want to build on that with a report that Gallup did a number of years ago, where they surveyed adults, I believe all over the world, and they asked them to describe young people in your community. So it's open-ended. Describe the youth of your community. Top 3 words in order: lazy, dangerous, and apathetic. 71% of adults in the survey had a negative image of young people. Berkeley Media Studies Group did a survey of all the news stories about young people over a 12-month period. Only 1% of those news stories were positive stories. Right, so we have this narrative about the role of young people. They're either these empty vessels that need to be filled up, they're perpetrators, so we medicate young people, we incarcerate young people, we turn our schools into prisons, literally, or spiritually. Right, so I'm curious. I want to bring the room into this conversation and ask, what do you want to know more about, or what from your own experience and wisdom do you want to add to the conversation? I'm going to walk around. We're going 3D.
There was a comment about the fact that a lot of the youth in developing countries are more optimistic than in developed countries. And I suspect that there in fact are more youth in developing countries than developed countries. In Europe, in Japan, in the US less so. It's an aging demographic. Asia is where, Africa is where, Latin America is where the youth are. And so that's seems to be one cleavage between views. And so in some sense, the youth globally are not one either. If you're from a global environment where the mood is sober, growth is not happening, things are flattening, and your generation will have less of a prosperous future than the previous, you're not going to be upbeat. On the other hand, if your grandfather was in poverty, your father worked in a middle-class job, and you are a startup CEO, you're going to just see the world as your oyster. And you can see where the distinction is geographically. So I think we need to think of youth also as really not one global, one single global system in some ways. And so splitting that, it'd be interesting to see how, if that's the case, how do we come up with strategies and policies to address the youth issue? So I'd like to get some thoughts on that.
Yeah, maybe I can jump on that.
But one thing to add, so hope is relative, right?
Geographically.
And there are drivers behind that. Alan, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And the data that we have is the differences between countries is very big. The gaps are very big. The data that I gave, that we found two slots between developing and developed countries. Just take the young people that are willing to buy brands that are good to society. In developing countries, it's 74% of the young people. In developed countries, it's nearly above 50. We're talking about 25 points different. The question is why? Is it demographic, as you said? Or is it because in developed countries, the structure of society, as you said, is so closed and so structured that young people don't feel that freedom to get their creativity away? And maybe in developing countries, that space is still a bit more open. It's just a theory, but I agree with you that it has to be decoded, and we have to find what triggers the fact that we can be close to these people. It has to be country by country. It's not a global strategy, cannot be. And that was my point, one of my first points, that even if you call yourself a global citizen, in the end you belong to a society, you belong to a country, you belong to a system. And country by country, they need to decode how to get close to these people and how to keep their freshness and their positiveness and not to break that.
So young people are not a monolith. Other questions? Yeah.
Hi, I work in various companies and various initiatives. Do a lot of in Nepal and regional Kenya, so very marginal societies and youth. I just have and this applies to developed as well, a kind of a feeling that, you know, how do you make education, the question is, how do you make education more empowering? Because I just kind of look at the education system and what they're teaching, and it's kind of stuck a little, you know, a few generations back. How do you stimulate the creativity? How do you give the youth through education? I'd just be interested in the panel's thoughts on that question.
Great, so the role of education in driving this. Ms. Rain, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, I would say make education sexy. You know, make it attractive. Well, not sexy for the young like that, but there's this concept that the professor or the teacher teaches in front of a class of 25 or X students. You know, and the concept is that I know everything, and you have to repeat what I'm giving to you. I believe that the new teachers and the new education models have to change. The new educators must be storytellers, must be as artists. They must be connectors. If you have a student where he has a great initiative, don't tell him what you know. Tell him how he can improve that idea, and how you are connected to somebody that's going to help develop that idea. Because if I'm going to go back to the concept of empty bottles. If you think that a young people needs information and needs more information, we don't need it. We already have it. That's why I was saying that this is a creativity time. What do we do with the information that we already have? How do we make it like more creative? How we use it more creative, and how we start new ideas from that?
I really like your idea about the age of creativity. I think it's a brilliant thought. And how do you bring entrepreneurship into the education system? How do you, is that happening anywhere? I mean, I'm not seeing it.
So let me go, I want to bring you in. So we want sexy education, right? Creative, engaged, but also how do we create this spark of entrepreneurship, this creativity? What are your thoughts?
But before that, I want to highlight this one contrast which has come up. You said 99% of the adults thought youth were useless and they were prone to crime and other things, or some such number you quoted. On the other hand, you have World Bank putting out reports about the demographic dividend. Demographic dividend is all about youth, all about young people who will have an economic value, and education is the process by which that transition can happen. If education as the first priority, we need that unwavering focus on how do you use the demographic dividend to have economic value added to those communities, so that everything else, creativity and all others, creativity will not flourish on an empty stomach. So we will have to go step by step. Education, the first step for education can be to keep that economic anchor. And we have opportunities available there, especially in these poorer countries, where there is the human asset is just sitting there. How do you then create it through an education process? We can differ on how that module will be, but at least the direction is clear, what we want to do with it, and that should be reasonably easy to handle. The only thing is you will have to overcome this high degree of suspicion, that what you pointed out in your introductory remarks. Because if that is going to be the basis, and if you're going to say, if you educate these guys, they're going to become sophisticated criminals, then we are in trouble. Okay, so how do you handle all those disparate issues will be the challenge.
So trust, multiple access, multiple players. Just trying to manage time. Any other questions? One over here, one over here, one over here. Okay, so we'll hit that order.
So I was interested when you were saying that you need to recognise that people are different in different contexts, and there's a bit of a tension. Theresa May said that if you consider yourself a global citizen of the world, then you're a citizen of nowhere, and you can see how well things are going in the UK at the moment. But I just wonder if young people do need to come from somewhere, isn't it possible to have dual identities, of considering yourself a global citizen and a national citizen? And how do you make people proud to be British or wherever you're from? Because we haven't taken on a European identity very well. That's part of why we left the EU. So that idea of a sort of supranational global citizenship as your identity hasn't worked. So how do you have dual identities, and is that possible?
In my opinion, there is a sentence that a CEO of a company I work for, I like the sentence. He always said, break the rules but never break the core. Okay? So you have to be proud of where you come. It's my personal opinion, where you come from, your country. But you can still have a global view and feeling and responsibility, but without breaking the core. Doing both is possible. What we don't have, in my opinion, we cannot do is to push people to be global citizens just because. Why? My question is, why? The countries exist, it's very rich to have different cultures in different countries. The thing is to be interconnected with that view that can be called global citizen. And I would just say a comment also about the question on education. I really do believe, I agree with you, that the gap of what the young people need and the education systems today, there's always been a gap, historically. But today the gap is very big. It's much, much bigger.
Things are changing so fast, the gap naturally.
But that's unfortunately, that's a context, and everybody agrees in that context. But the difference between context and action, it's a big step. Changing educational programs in the countries, it's a very slow thing to do. You ask where, I think I read that Finland is trying to do something like that. I read something about that. I don't know if somebody knows about that, but I read that the new schooling system in Finland is a little bit what you described. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think there is one, it's Finland, right? I think there is one country that is trying to do, and but in order to answer your question, no, the educational system is still very, very conservative compared to what people is asking for.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to say one example on that. It's, for example, on the Shaper survey that I was quoting on the panel. I mean, yes, there's this identity from where you are, but there needs to be like this global conscious. For example, the number one answer of young people about what's the number one risk in the world, they all said it's climate change. But the most shocking thing is the second response, that they say that it's not my problem, because I live where there are no glaciers. And it's like, okay, yeah, but how can you, from from a European country that has no glaciers, that has no context like these melting big ice cubes, can do something for this global trend that is happening. So when we're talking about global citizenship, we're not referring like one nationality of the world. We're referring that each one of us has an identity which gives us like this rich diversity that we must seek, but also we must be conscious about that our local actions have global impact. So and reverse that climate change, I can't do anything about it, and in all the fields.
Jeff, there's a bit of that connection between local and global. Yes.
Yes, hi, my name is Sven. I have 4 kids, and for my kids, money is not so important.
Yep.
And my question to the panel is that also your experience in this new generation, money is really not the first topic.
I think it depends on how much money you have. Someone want to go ahead and start with that?
Depends on the context, depends on which particular young person you speak to. If that young person is from very desperate situations, especially first generation, before that it was even more complicated, or someone in a refugee camp, etc. So their attitudes will be completely different. But the innate goodness will come once we engage. And money what? Money quantifies value. If I get a salary of $1,000. It's just that my expertise is quantified at $1,000. But that's the purpose of money. It's a humanly created instrument. Okay, it's more, we have to bother more about the value instead of linking it with money. If there is any way we can create those values across the board, irrespective of your children are privileged in a way because they have a stable home, a stable country, but there are millions or probably billions of others who haven't had that opportunity. And I think as global citizens, or if our duty is to make them global citizens by giving them exposure and ability to integrate is what the point I've been highlighting right from the beginning. Just one point about the entrepreneur, what your boss said. My boss said something equally, except an entrepreneur is one who doesn't break the rule but always bends the rule and to get things done. So that you have a framework, you have a sort of regimented framework maybe, but within that you don't get into trouble, but you have innovative, increasingly creative ways of negotiating the system.
Fish was next. I'll just add one thing, because there's actually interesting data about shifts in what motivates young people. And as you were speaking to, Alan, there's a real shift away from money to experiences.
Yeah.
Is what drives young people's behavior, and that is global and that is generational. And God bless you for having 4 children.
But also, can I just, on the topic of money, I do believe that the new generation really needs to understand a little bit more of how money works, how debt works, because I got here into Davos like getting a lot of debts in my life, no. But instead of that, there's an example, and I'm sorry for talking about a lot of my city. That's what I do. But the standard living in my city, it's about $2,000 a month. Like the budget to have an apartment, a rent, and a family. But when we ask the young people in this survey, they say that they are okay with $500. So what is telling us that they don't that the young people doesn't have the consciousness and the concept of money and how much our things worth. No? So I just wanted to say that.
Financial literacy. Yes, sir.
I really appreciated the shout out to the importance of having young people in spaces like Davos and the nod to the youth co-chairs of the WEF. Still, as I've gone around here this week, I've seen relatively few young people, and especially relatively few young people between the ages of 13 and 25, like myself, which I think is concerning, not just because, as we see in our work, young people are creating every day new innovations in healthcare, education delivery models, social enterprises, but also that they're the most impacted stakeholders in the decisions that we make here. They're the inheritors of the future we're creating in Davos. So my question is, what is your vision for how young people are included at the WEF in 2025, and what do we need to do in order to get there?
So you are running Davos in 2025. What would you do to put young people, particularly the 13 to 25-year-olds, into the center of this work?
Would you like to run Davos?
Well, it's not what I do, but I mean, it's a tricky question because I'm not a member. I don't work at the World Economic Forum. I'm sure they have plans in order to do that because they cannot avoid it. Right? Yesterday I was in a panel also with some media people, so one of the biggest medias in the world, and they were saying what you were saying. Young people, they don't take like, your media are going to tell me what I have to know. Today I have my voice and I can also give my opinion. And that's called social media, right? Which is breaking everything. So I don't know if I'm answering your question, and I cannot answer it because I don't have a plan for that, but what I can say is that they cannot avoid it. But I agree with you that if you go into the corridors, you don't see a lot of 13 to 25 years old people, but I think it's a very good step to have them co-chairing. It's a very good step.
Yeah.
And as I said a few minutes ago, going from context to actions, that's where the work is. Everybody has data about what is happening, what they feel, what they need. But then getting into actions is not just the World Economic Forum, it's also the countries, it's also, and that's a big deal. But I think the co-chairing is a very, very good signal for the future.
Yeah, well, I cannot speak on behalf of the World Economic Forum. I'm not part or member of the World Economic Forum. I'm part of the Global Shapers community. And I really believe that they are doing an amazing effort to let us be part of the community of the tools and to have access to this information to get like this whole perspective of what's happening in Davos and what's happening in the world. I believe that the co-chairing this year was the biggest step they took, and I really believe it's very bold and a very assertive decision. I think it's really great. For the next 10 years, I believe that there's going to be more participation, but I also believe that the Global Shapers community is going to push to have more participation because, I mean, right here, right now, we are 49 global shapers, but around the world we are over 7,000, and we want to increase that number. And by the end of this year, we're aiming to reach out 10,000, as Klaus Schwab said in the opening remarks. So I do believe that the World Economic Forum is empowering people through the Global Shapers community, and I do believe that this is going to be like a domino effect. If I empower them, they're going to be participating in the next years.
Just let me ask you a question. It's an experience from 35 years ago. Have you ever seen a film from Tom Hanks called Big?
Yeah.
Yeah. Remember that film? Back in the 80s?
Yeah.
It was 35 years ago?
I would, yeah.
So actually it's an adult that becomes a child because of, I don't know, remember what. And actually,
He wishes for it.
and a company actually takes the child as a CMO, right? And he starts developing the toys for the child of his age. So this is a topic that is not turning in 2018, so this is from 35 years ago. So it's not new. It's more important because the generations are more interconnected, but it's certainly not new.
Okay, would you want to, you're running,
I'd be very surprised if in 2025 the power structures are going to change very much. It's just that the power structures can be sensitized much better because at the end of it, there is a flow, and that flow is something that if it has to change, it's going to change over the next 100 years. It's not going to change in a matter of 7-8 years. The people, as you're saying, very rarely do you see someone in your age group. That's a given. That's the way the society is structured. If it changes, it's because you somehow, by your participation, are able to show that I can bring better value to society. And the power centers accept that because they see the value, and therefore they co-opt you. But if you say that we are going to kind of elbow our way into this game by nudging out the power centers, I'm a little skeptical. Okay, so it's not going to be a conflict. It should not be a conflict. It is not like I can, it's a zero-sum game and I can get to having a negotiating power only by pushing you out. That's going to do a lot more damage. So the way is to kind of negotiate with the system. It's wonderful to have so many co-chairs. That's a good step because those thoughts are getting reflected in the corridors of power. And I'm sure they're getting accepted, especially if they have an economic value. Because in a forum like this, the bottom line is that it'll have to have an economic value. If it is not there, we can say all the nice things about it, but it'll have to have that underlying economic value. Okay? If you can bring that from the table, sure, you have a case, and it'll happen. You don't have to push it. It'll happen automatically.
Albie Sachs, who was a Supreme Court Justice in South Africa, wrote about the ending of apartheid there, that all social change is impossible until it happens, and then it was inevitable. And so it'll be interesting to see where this goes. I want to invite my panelists to close, and we'll go down the line, and you've got smart, connected, clearly beautiful human beings in this room who are all sitting with a fundamental question, I think, which is, so what? So what do I do with this? Where do I go? So what is your advice to these folks who are interested in supporting young people to be global citizens?
Yeah, I would say pause for a moment and think about not how you will become a global citizen, because for me it's a given. We will have to worry about how do we get the rest of humanity become global citizens, to think globally without sacrificing the uniqueness that they all possess, whether it can be culture, country, religion, etc. All that is there. Let's stay with it. Despite all that, how do we have a thread of humanity running across so that we are all truly global? We care about everything else we engage with, and cherish our differences. And the forum such as this is an opportunity to open those doors. These can bring resources in order to achieve those inclusiveness elements that we are talking about. Otherwise, it's going to be this chasm between what exists now, what exists between rural and urban, between developing and developed countries. But we will have to make the push in the direction so that it becomes totally inclusive. Thank you.
Nobody touched about Canada and the multiculturalism yet, or I missed it maybe.
We haven't touched about any country really.
Because we talked about the country, and he mentioned that we have to be identifying ourselves as, but examples of a developing country and a developed country. Canada is a clear-cut example of the gentleman who said about being British is being British, but there is a formulation in that part of the world to be inclusive, to be multicultural, and to be engaging, and to bring people from different folks, starting to think as one. And whether it's a Chinese guy or an Indian guy, the mindset, the concept is changing, and that's an amazing example of where the world is going. And that's, I'm sorry to be a button.
No, we have a vote for
because I
Canada
thought,
over here.
I just thought
And you also
I'd
have
bring
your
this
neighbor Trump, who is really not doing that. So
He's making America great again. Thank you.
Sorry about that, but I
No.
thought this was something.
Thank you for that. As a closing phrase, I would say that bring young people to the table, bring them to the discussion. I mean, not only as a checklist of equality, as a checklist of diversity, as a checklist to get into the photo that we are doing it, but really listen to what young people have to say, because whether we like it or not, we are changing the world, and we're changing it right now. It's better that we change it together. It's better that we must listen to the billions of people that represent the youth, and also redefine the concept of youth. You know, it's not a demographic. It may be a state or where you have the energy to change things. So let's think about and let's make, for me, it's making the right questions about what's going to happen in the next 50 years and how our community and how the young people are really involved in the global issues and how they are participating right now. You know, and that will be.
I think we have a tremendous opportunity here, and all the data that we shared this morning, I mean, these people are optimistic, these people want better society, these people want to buy brands that could make good society, and we have to embrace that. But the way to embracing that, we have two ways of doing it. The first is waiting for the governments and the states and the institutions to do something and discuss between us about the context. That's number one. Or number two, to do it ourselves every day. So the question is, what can you do in your life every day in order to be closer to these people, to get ideas from them? Do you work in a company? Get 2 or 3 people of 20 years old or 18 years old, I don't know, to work there for 15 days. But my point is, it's a big opportunity and we have to learn from them, and it's not waiting that will make the difference. It's really doing it one by one, and I think we all have the capacity here in this room to do a little thing every day in order to be closer to this segment of the population that it's very rich and they have a lot to learn. I mean, I was telling to my wife, I have a 2 years old, I was telling to my wife, I learn more from the baby than the baby from me. But in order to have that openness, we have sometimes to change our mindsets as adults. So my point is, let's do it. Let's not wait. I mean, we can, what the World Economic Forum is doing, it's awesome. and I challenge what other global institutions are doing that. But we can talk about that. But what do we do in our everyday lives? And that's the opportunity is big.
I love it. Real social change is lived in the daily. I want to leave us with a big idea, a small action, and then an offer. First of all, let's just give a round of applause to our panelists for their smiles, their time, and their generosity. So for me, being a global citizen is expanding our circle of concern. Being a global citizen is expanding our circle of concern. And what I worry most about in the world right now is we are drawing our circles of concern smaller and smaller. And there's a real cost to that. I live in Boston. My kids are multiracial, and I remember after the 2016 election there, and I would say probably 60% of the kids in this large urban public school are immigrants or first generation. Two young men came up to my daughter and said she's going to get deported. Right, this is a student they see every day. Like, we're drawing our circles of concern smaller and smaller. The second thing is the four most powerful words you can ever say to a young person. So remember nothing else, remember this. The four most powerful words you can say to a young person is, how can I help? Right, how can I help? One, because you're offering, right, your wisdom, your connections, but where does the power lie in that question? Right, with the young person. So you're not saying, here, let me help you, or here's what I did when I was your age, or this is why you're an idiot, which is the messages young people get, but offering ourselves in service of young people. There was a significant school shooting in Parkland, Florida, United States, and young people that really organized around it. And this message came out as, this is great, like, our older generation has messed everything up, young people are going to figure this out. And the young people we were supporting were like, no, actually, y'all made this mess, we have to figure this out together. So the idea is not that the older generation is the answer or that the younger generation has the answer, but the power lies when we understand that our liberation is tied up together. Right? And so as we invite young people in with that question of how can I help, we're putting them in a position of being equal, that we are going to figure this out together. Finally, just as a personal offer, so Peace First is a global NGO that helps brands, celebrities, companies engage with young people in meaningful ways through campaigns. So our first big campaign was called Make America Kind Again after the 2016 election, where in 3 weeks we got young people from 40 states, half from Trump counties, half from Clinton counties, to build and design youth-led initiatives on tolerance and inclusion. We're talking to the Vatican about doing a project around refugees in Europe, so helping young people build welcoming communities. We're working with the Red Cross globally to reimagine what it means to be a Red Cross volunteer and grounding in youth innovation. So if there are ways that we can be of help with our research, our network of young people for the work that you want to do, that's why we're here. So I'll stay after. The panelists will hopefully have a few minutes too. Thank you again to the Misk Foundation for welcoming us into your beautiful living room. Thank you all for watching the sunrise together. And we've got work to do. And I love the note that you ended it on. We do a lot of talking, and I think it's time to get to work. So let's do it. Thank you.
Thank you.
It was brilliant.
No, thank you,
Yeah,
thank you.
Thank you so much.
No, thank you, thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to carry you both everywhere I go.
Please, sure you
Yeah.
can. It was amazing. Ooh, the talk. Oh, thank you very much.